Welcome back to the podcast at episode 38. Moving along here. Just got a message from someone on the email saying that I've done more episodes than most podcasts ever do. So I guess that's something. But no, your ears are not deceiving you. If you were listening at the beginning here and you heard our airplane, that is the sound of the Caribbean Ocean on Latoc Beach here in St. Lucia. We're broadcasting to you live from Radio Destination Aviation. This is an actual destination aviation podcast. Came down here on American Airlines, which all in all was pretty good. The person next to me got up immediately when we landed here, started throwing their bags around. I have no qualms with people that want to stand up and stretch your legs. I get the adage everybody says in the back, you're not getting off the plane anytime soon. I get it. I get it. People want to stretch their legs. But it's another thing when somebody starts throwing their bags on you. But I couldn't complain too much because I'm on vacation and I left a balmy, I think, about 8 degrees, and it's been roughly 82, 83 degrees here. So I actually went down to the ocean and recorded the waves here. They're insane. They kind of push in right here at Latoc Beach, so staying at the Sandals Regency Latoc. And so it's been kind of nice because there is the George F. Charles Airport, which is just kind of to the north of us here. I hate to say regional airport, but my 737 with American Airlines isn't landing here. It looked like mostly ATRs, some Lear jets, stuff like that landing there. We'll get a little more into that as we go along the podcast. Just talk about some of the operations, and someone who is an aviation enthusiast got to see some of these landings that's happening. And also too, it's a port, Point Safine cruise port, I think as it is. But I've seen Norwegian, Virgin, all sorts of cruise ships coming and going, and also some cargo ships docked out a ways, obviously supplying this Caribbean nation of Saint Lucia with all of their essentials. But it's been a lovely time, a beautiful island. Probably highlight some of the stuff here if you ever find your way down into St. Lucia. I actually depart back to the Chicagoland tomorrow, which looks like we have another polar vortex coming our way and potentially around 0 degrees or below that. But it's been nice. It's been a nice escape to get out and just kind of enjoy this. I've actually never been to St. Lucia. I've had some family members that have come down here. This is my first time staying. This is a Sandals resort. I think I mentioned that earlier on. And it's been nice. It's a nice place. The food is kind of so-so. I'm probably a food snob. We have a lot of great restaurants around Chicago, and it sounds funny to say we have better seafood in the Midwest, but to be quite honest, you kind of get the kind of small shrimp and I don't know. There's some things that's phenomenal to be on vacation, but I'm also looking forward to getting back to the grind, and just getting out and about. I've seen some new neighbors come and go from around me. We actually have like kind of a little villa here with sidewalks around us, which is nice. I see a couple of them walking down right now outside the window. So we'll do a shout out through the window. Hello, neighbors, and welcome to Destination Aviation and all of our listeners. So before I get into everything all St. Lucia, I'll touch on a few things back home because as usual, you can't step away from everything too much. Been monitoring things that have been happening in the news. Not too much new with some of the accidents that we've spoke about. American Airlines or PSA 5342. There's been some stuff, we talked in the past about some of the congressional hearings and some of the back and forth. It sounds like, some lawmakers are still saying the same, restrict helicopter operations, shouldn't be flying at night and training around congested airspace. But I've read several articles since I've been here, but I haven't read anything that really shines any light onto any of the stuff that we've already talked about. So rather than get into it, it really just seems more like speculation still at this point of what may have happened or not. So if you want to listen to some of the stuff we've talked about in the past, those are in the past episodes. But for now, not too much there. Also, I said the accident in Alaska. I haven't heard much that I have seen that would move the needle for us to really talk about further on those until the investigation continues on forward. There was another unfortunate accident at the Scottsdale Airport SDL, Sierra Delta Lima, General Aviation facility just north of Phoenix. Vince Neil's aircraft, without Vince Neil on it, I'm sure if you've seen in the news. So Vince Neil, obviously being a member of the rock and roll band Motley Crue, but the aircraft, a Learjet 35A, as in Alpha, landed on, well, Scottsdale only has one runway, and that's runway 321. But upon landing, the left main gear collapsed, causing the aircraft to skid off the runway and into a parked jet aircraft onto the ramp at Gulfstream 200. You can actually see some of the video, surveillance video online of this aircraft going into the back end of another one. And there's unfortunately the pilot of Vince Neil's aircraft, the Lear 35 Alpha, was killed in the crash. 78-year-old pilot. Vince Neil's girlfriend was on the aircraft. Everybody else survived on the plane. Just unfortunate, when you look at runway designs, you're trying to design for aircraft to be in the 90% percentile range for when there's an excursion or when the aircraft leaves the runway. I looked online here because I've actually toured this airport before, and it has kind of this rock aggregate stuff in the safety areas of the airport. But when you look at it, at least from what I could tell, to the ramp is probably at least 350 feet, and to design 250 feet. Usually, like I said, is that 90 percentile where aircraft, if they leave the runway, will end up kind of the same 1,000 feet off the end of the runway where there's a clear area where if an aircraft does an excursion, it won't, unfortunately, have something like this happen. Obviously, probably a high rate of speed looking from the videos here when that main left gear collapsed, and then just unfortunate random luck where the aircraft, the Gulfstream 200, was parked. But Scottsdale Airport is a very tight airport. If you look at it on a map, it's got a lot of urban sprawl around it. It's an interesting airport. The Federal Aviation Administration doesn't like airports to have what they call through the fence operations, where somebody builds a facility and accesses the airport without the airport actually owning that land directly. But Scottsdale Airport has a lot of this. So I think it's, at least from the articles that I said, it said this was parked on private property, which is very much a potential. Usually at airports, I would say that that's an error in the news reporting. But in this case, there's a lot of, like I said, what they call through the fence operations. And then this airport in particular, I think just the way it was built, if you go in there, and you go on a lot of the side streets, you can actually see aircraft taxiing onto the airport. They have these giant gates basically that open up to let the aircraft in to the airport. This aircraft looked like it wasn't through a gate or anything. It was just sitting there when it was impacted, unfortunately. But like I said, it's something that the FAA doesn't like to do. Not saying you don't see this out there, but it's a practice they don't very much want airports to follow. They like airports to most airports, like we've talked about, at least in the United States, are government-owned facilities. And when you don't own the land directly, like in the case of Scottsdale, there's things that come in and they start talking about grant assurance violations, stuff like that. Good title. So, but to their credit in Scottsdale, they've done things where they've working with the hand they've been dealt, and a lot of this and being under private ownership and basically just having access agreements that are equal to a facility that would be on the airport. But I will say it is difficult when somebody owns private land and they're accessing a facility that you start talking about what's kind of fair and equal rates and charges and stuff like that. When you talk about rehabbing taxiways and runways and auditing what these people are doing. So it's interesting. I'm not necessarily against it. It's just, it's hard when you start talking about something that's not under direct control of the airport, because then just the reality of the nature, you start losing some of your ability to work some of that rules and regulations and, making sure that if they're, accessing the airport, that, they have the right insurance and all that. I'm not saying that that's not the case here. I think that they do a really good job in Scottsdale of like I said, working with the hand they were dealt. But most airport district's office will not want to entertain an airport allowing private land to access the facilities because, like I said, you lose kind of the control over the facility, at least in the ideology of it. But in this case, unfortunately, the pilot was killed. A left main gear collapse on this aircraft. So, I mean, this one seems pretty upfront. Obviously, mechanics of why it collapsed and some of the maintenance records on this aircraft will have to be looked into. But all of those will come. Vince has said publicly about his girlfriend, who just was released from the hospital, that the investigation is ongoing, but he thanks the first responders and that the daughter of the 78-year-old pilot said that her dad, veteran in the military from the Dallas area, that she thinks her dad's actions saved everyone's lives on the aircraft, including the co-pilot, and that her dad died doing what he loved to do, because instead of retiring, he continued to fly until the age of 78, and that flying was his passion. Motley Crue is set to do their residency in Las Vegas in about 40 days. It doesn't appear that this will probably change those plans. I wouldn't think, anyways, at least from the stuff that I've seen. But the Scottsdale airport is reopened. Like I said, probably look into the maintenance records of why the gear failed, at least to get maybe some idea of this. Obviously, we don't see this happening a lot. I was just watching it was called, I think it's off the air now, but it was something like Jet Sales or Sail Jets. While I was down here in St. Lucia, it was one of those, programs. The TV here hasn't been great, which is fine. I mean, I don't think when you're on vacation, why would you want to necessarily get on and watch a bunch of TV? But they were selling a Lear 35 at the Dallas Executive Airport. So I messaged somebody that I knew down there and said, hey, they're selling a plane, because the guy that was out there was like, wait a minute, I have to use the lavatory in front of everybody because it's a seat lavatory with the pull curtain. And anyways, so I messaged him and said, hey, this is what's happening. This was before their time. It looked like probably they were making a big deal that they were driving people off to this plane on a Cadillac Escalade. And they said it's a 2020, so I would assume that probably came out in 2020. I don't think you brag about your car, even if it's a year old, on a program like that. So I think they ended up selling not that aircraft to him. I think they ended up going with, I want to say, a Bombardier Challenger, but not sure. Anyway, it was mildly entertaining. They were working at the FBO Jet Access. I've talked to those guys in the past before. They look like they have a nice program going on there. It's funny, the guy who started Jet Access, I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but he used to own convenience stores, I think like gas stations, and sold that off and kind of said, what can I get into next? And being a fixed base operator and selling fuel and stuff, and I guess in this case, selling aircraft, Jet Access actually has their own airplane as well. So, like I said, it was mildly entertaining. I think it would have been entertaining for anybody that wasn't even necessarily an aviation enthusiast. However, though, maybe I'm wrong, because I'm pretty sure the TV show got canceled. So out on that one. But our thoughts are with the pilot at the accident in Scottsdale, and I'm glad for the most part his actions, and at least from what his daughter's saying, saved everybody on the airplane. But they said if you look at the video online, probably, especially in that instance, really kind of uncontrollable landing, high rate of speed, and losing that main landing gear. That's going to be an interesting legislative event when we get back. I don't know if event's the right word, but we're in interesting legislative times. People at the FAA pretty much have stopped responding to information and stuff, inquiries. The federal workforce has been on the chopping block with, like we just mentioned, with the Department of Government Efficiency. And Congress has been saying about trying to reduce workforce. So a lot of the stuff that we do on a daily basis, grants and everything, we're not getting really responses to it, as people are trying to figure out either whether they're taking retirement, they're leaving, they're just not responding because they don't know the guidance. So it's interesting times that we're in right now. Our continuing resolution here expires in March. As you know, there's been dimming hope that we will have a funded bill. A lot of the stuff that's coming down, we've talked about this before. I think the ideology here is probably less money, but maybe potentially less regulations. The Trump administration has offered up a 10 for 1. So every new regulation, you get rid of 10 regulations. So again, interesting times. It changes every day. It's really hard to even say like, hey, here's a pathway, because you get on and everything's changed. But I did see that Trump was at the Boeing plant trying to look at the new 747. I think he's trying to get it in before the end of his presidency, unless he goes for that third term. Right now, the Boeing manufacturers have said that they have pushed that aircraft off until at least 2028. I think he's trying to get it in maybe by 2027 so he can use it at the end of his presidency there. Obviously, we've talked about this before, and we actually just did a highlight on the Air Force One itself and the color scheme that came under John F. Kennedy. Trump has this different color scheme, which is dark blue and red. I think he's gone back to that at his inauguration. He had that 747 on one of the cakes at one of the events he was at. I go back to I don't personally like the color scheme. It's not bad. I mean, but there's just something very iconic about Air Force One. But as I've said, up for the experiment. At this point, we're not really a political podcast either way, so we're just kind of moving with it. But it looks very much like his 757 paint scheme. It's interesting bold colors, but he did tour an aircraft. There was a 747 that was owned by the Saudi royal family, and he was touring that. It was actually at the Palm Beach International Airport, as I guess he went around and looked at configurations. So when they build an Air Force One, they actually built two of them. There's two of the current ones. I believe when they travel international, both 747s travel with the president in case there is a need for the backup. Usually they have that within the region somewhere. So he's on the case there. And like I said, it's a kind of United States overall aviation federal legislative. We'll figure it out as we go, because right now, if I say something on this podcast, by the time I'm done really putting this up onto our platforms, it probably will be outdated. So moving beyond that. The last Gulfstream G650 rolled off the line. That was considered, is still, I mean, if you have a G650, it's considered amazing. But all the rap songs out there, if you look back at like Ja Rule flying in your G200, you don't say that anymore. Nobody's going to respect you in that world if you have a G200. So as we move on to new Gulfstream variations, the last one rolled off the assembly line, and I'm sure we'll get put into nice hands. I remember when that aircraft actually came out, I was working at San Jose, and Steve Jobs' wife actually had one of the first G650s, and there was an issue with it, and they ended up taking it back and giving her another one. But I guess when you're Steve Jobs' wife, you can turn back in your G650 that's what's having issues. It has something to do with some sort of oscillation while flying that they were experiencing. So that aircraft was returned. As far as I had heard, I should put that on there. That's what was explained to me from some of the people that worked around the hangar facility. Maybe that's there's always room in there for fodder, and potentially that's not what happened. But I will say I did see a new aircraft, so maybe it was just an upgrade to the upgrade. Nevertheless, G650's out, and moving on with Gulfstream. It's a unfortunate story out of Texarkana. Well, I guess fortunate for just how people kind of end up in life, but the Texarkana Regional Airport. If you've heard Texarkana, it's in the song Eastbound and Down. If you haven't heard of it, or you haven't heard that song, that's probably it for Texarkana. But a 16-year-old showed up at the signature flight support at the airport and demanded an aircraft. He had a rifle pointed at the customer service representative. She quickly alerted police, and a pilot actually who had a loaded firearm creeped up behind him and basically commanded the teenager to get on the ground and kick the gun away, and had him basically at gunpoint until police arrived. The teenager said to him that he either wanted to die or go to jail because of his home life. So a sad story there, sad state of affairs. But fortunately, he did not get the aircraft thanks to this pilot coming in and kind of commanding the situation down there in Texarkana, where the boys are thirsty in Atlanta, and there's beer in Texarkana. That's Eastbound and Down lyrics. If you haven't listened to it, go take a listen to the song from Jerry Reed. But there's so much happening. We'll get to it when I get back. I'm here on vacation. I kind of wanted to get on, do a destination podcast. I haven't done that yet. Usually I'm in my own surroundings when I'm doing this show. This is the first time I've done it kind of remotely. So I wanted to, because I think it would be cool, one, to do something that was a destination kind of piece of traveling and getting out more of where maybe I see this show going. Don't know. Again, my podcast, right? And that's kind of why I do it, because, I have a lot of thoughts and ideas of what I think is cool. You guys may think differently. You always send me some notes in the the emails, and you're always welcome to send me a destination if you so choose. Maybe somewhere we're going to plane, but we'll talk about that later on down the road with some of the thoughts we have for the podcast. But for now, here in Saint Lucia, this has been so we're on day 5 of the trip. We head back tomorrow. Had to get back. Not really my plans necessarily, but some of the people that I was traveling with, they needed to get back for their own stuff into the negative degree temperature. Not saying no, I have stuff to do. I always have stuff to do. I'm doing this right now. I'm on vacation, but I am staring at the ocean. I'm staring out over here at the Latak Beach here, over towards, like I said, where the cruise ships actually go in, and the VD Lighthouse, which we actually went up to. It's pretty cool little lighthouse. It got a view of it at night coming into our room here as we overlook the bay. And like I said, one of the really cool things is the George Charles Airport. That's not the airport we flew into when we came in here. We came in on American Airlines via O'Hare to Miami Dade International Airport, and then off to Honora International Airport, which is on the southern part of the island here. Main runway 28 and runway 10. Pretty easy. It was ramp unloading. We had a 737 MAX with American Airlines. Unloaded, went past British Airways, came into the terminal. Customs was fast. I did the declaration form. You could do that 96 hours in advance. Pretty simple stuff. Did it. Most people didn't seem like it, but they were filling it out in line. Went up, passed it in. Easy peasy. Went through, grabbed my bag, declared nothing, asked where I was going, kind of the standard questions. Hopped in a van and came up here. It's about an hour and 10-minute drive from the southern airport up to here. And from looking at the George airport on this side of the northern part of the island, it looks like it's mostly a regional airport, probably shuttling people back and forth. It looks like it could do helicopter rides. My brother and his wife, they were up here probably 15 or so years ago, and I remember my father bought them a helicopter ride. Well, I should say, I think it was my stepmother that ended up buying it because it was a funny story at the wedding. Like I think I've mentioned this before. We grew up with not a lot of money, and my brother's wedding, I remember that. I think she had said that she did something nice, and he said, "What did you do?" Which at the time was a $300 helicopter ride from the northern part of the island down to the southern if you want to avoid the ride. But the ride was fun. I mean, it's what you normally would expect from an island. A lot of people say St. Lucia is kind of the Hawaii of the East Coast. And I will say, from visiting a lot of the islands in the Bahamas, last year we were in Aruba, this does have a lot of topography to it. So in a lot of ways, it does remind me of Hawaii. When I lived on the West Coast, Hawaii seemed like kind of an easier obtainable goal in the sense of travel. I don't really want to burn so much travel now traveling from the Midwest. So this was a nice thought and nice place to go, as I've only heard good things, and my experience here has been great. Like I said, the Samuels report has been fantastic. It is, for the price point. I don't know if it's something that I like I said I honestly, if I were to come back and do it again, I would either try maybe, I don't know, another resort or maybe rent a house or something. This has been really cool. It's been a nice experience. But Sandals has a very unique way about it. My stepmother, who I spoke about, she actually was a travel agent. So they used to travel to Sandals if she sold a certain amount. I think they usually would go to Jamaica because there was less amounts to sell to get a free night in Jamaica than there was in St. Lucia. Usually this was more of a premier resort. So they have 3 Sandals actually on the island, and you can take a bus around to each one of them. So we headed down to some of the other ones. And like I said, it's not bad. Somebody asked me in the pool the other day. She actually does finance. I think she was trying to convince me to do financing for for her. But one of the interesting things about it is, they were. I was like, yeah. I was like, I don't know how to really put my finger on it. I was like, it's been fine. It's been lovely. Um, the it's kind of hit and miss, I'd say. Friendliness. Some people are really friendly. Others aren't friendly at all. Which, like I said, dealing with tourists, can't necessarily blame them. If you get down onto the beaches, everybody and their mother does ask you to do something, go somewhere, do something. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the excursions that we've done on the island. But before we get into that, I did want to just kind of highlight the George Airport on the northern part here, because I've been watching these ATRs come and go from the airport. Like I said, really it looks like traveling people from the southern parts of Saint Lucia to the northern parts, and it's kind of cool. They have local news here, and it seems like they've been highlighting not only this island but islands in the Caribbean for air service. They had kind of whole segment on it. One of the new routes they were highlighting were a United flight from Newark uh, to I believe Nassau, which I just saw on the news that United is now the largest aircraft operator in the world. I believe that they just hit their thousandth airplane in their fleet, and they also service more destinations than any other airline. So they've been expanding their footprint. But it was pretty cool to see that kind of people taking interest in it. Obviously, in these islands where the connectivity is really sea or air. It seems like they highlighted not only that, they talked about there was an incident with an Amerijet cargo jet. It looked like a 777. I saw this on the news. They had a minor issue landing in one of the islands down here, but kind of talking all things aviation, which I thought was pretty cool that they're highlighting it, talking about new service. But up here at the George F.L. Charles identifier of Sierra Lima uniform airport. They have mostly, like I said, it looked like regional. I want to say regional, but from other countries, but smaller airlines, what we probably consider regional in the United States. But ATR 72s. But just for instance, Caribbean Airlines flight 244 from the port of Spain into St. Lucia landed here. I said, seen that, a lot of helicopters. I did see a Flex jet the other day landing from Omaha, Nebraska. This is a Challenger 350 on FlexJet that came down here, pushing it to the limits. It looked like about 5 hours, 5.5 hours roughly, to get down here. I messaged it over to a friend in aviation, and they said, I wonder if it's Warren Buffett. I said, oh, unless he's flying on his competitors, because he's the majority owner of NetJets. But you know what? Warren Buffett might just do that. So it looks like I said, a part of a regional airport here for the George F. Charles, but it's been so much fun just to kind of sightsee, sit down by the pool, watch the aircraft come and go. And in St. Lucia, you do get a lot of rain. It's actually starting to rain right now. It's coming down pretty good, but it seems like it only lasts maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and then it gets sunny again. So if you want a green island, which is here and lush, you're probably not going to do with a little bit of rain. But as long as the first couple days, unlike other places I've been, I'm like, oh no, it's going to rain all day. So it really seems like a 10 or 15-minute rain so far, and then it moves out. But it can be a downpour. Right now, it's downpouring, and I saw an ATR coming in the other day, just kind of skirted right in because the visibility can get pretty low coming in up here at the airport. But they got a runway on the Cardinal, which is 927. So 207 degrees and 90 degrees on the runway headings here. Total of 6,227 feet by 148 feet wide. Plenty of space for what they're bringing in and out of here. But it looks like a pretty cool little airport. Jet fuel is actually not a bad price, $5.17 per gallon. So there you go. It seems like the spot to be. There's a lot of resorts up on this part of uh, country. But like I said, you don't see any of the kind of main carriers that you see down at the larger airport. British Airways, American, United, all those fun airports. Probably would have taken United if I were to come down here, but it seems like they only have Saturday flights. So they had a flight yesterday, kind of a direct route, which would have been great. Unfortunately, the people that I was going to be traveling with, they couldn't go on a Saturday, but I could have. So unfortunately, on my side of the world, um, I had to take a weekday flight, but that's okay. Which is a connection. Miami's pretty good. They've been doing a modernization plan. They haven't gotten quite there yet, but they're investing a lot of money into the Miami airport, which is much needed. And I'm looking forward to getting back because I have global entry, which I'm hoping will allow me. I don't get back in. My flight lands a little past midnight tomorrow. When I get back into that kind of negative degree temperature, I can see from the cameras at the house that we are snowbound, snow ridden there. So I'll be breaking my shovel out when I get back home. But that's all right. I'm invigorated with all this St. Lucia sun and seafood. Uh, but as far as some of the stuff we've done here, which I would say would be pretty cool. On top of just kind of hanging out and taking it easy, because that's something that everybody should be doing on vacation. One of the things that, or I say a couple of the things that I would recommend that would be pretty cool. Obviously, a boat tour is something that would be, you know, for I think most people fun. It was fun for me, and went out and about, got to see a little bit of the island side. Escape from land. Like I said, here it's actually pretty wavy in this little Latak kind of bay almost. It reminds me of the movie Castaway. Every time I went in the ocean, I actually got blown at with a whistle uh, when he's trying to get off the island. And, well said. But I got called back in. The boat ride was fun though. There's a lot of people that do it. Ours we picked up just on the beach. One of the people that was yelling at us, along with the mud bath, mineral baths. Go and get yourself some healing Saint Lucia mud on you. That was pretty cool. The person that I talked to down in the pool that is into finances, this is their sixth time to Saint Lucia, and she actually fell over because there's some jagged rocks down there. She fell over and cut her knee open, and then she told me the whole story right before we were going to have lunch, which was disgusting. Her knee got infected and pus came out. And so they do have a medical clinic here at the Sandals that I'm at. But she went downtown to a hospital, and I guess she did a meta that kind of screening. She said it was probably more of non-sterilized equipment they worked with here. Who knows? That was her experience with it. But as long as you're washing your feet, it's not too bad. Anywhere you go, right? If you're going into one of these areas, if you're just kind of watching out where you're going and where you're stepping, you're probably going to be fine. But that's pretty cool. I didn't know if I felt completely healed, but I am a little bit sunburned from it. I don't know if that equates to it, but just, you know what? Everybody here likes to say, do the mud bath. So I would say that, and like I said, if you get out and about into some of the town areas, whether you take a boat over and they do a little stop, it's kind of cool just to get out, see some of the experiences here. We actually watched a little bit of the local news just to see what was going on in different areas, different resorts that were getting built, and so the boat tour was pretty neat. Now, I didn't do this, but some of the other people around here were telling me the horseback riding on the beaches are fun. I actually rode on a cart on Mackinac Island in Michigan with a horse. His name was Jake. And he seemed pretty upset to be pulling my fat ass around the island there. I didn't want to hurt some poor little horse here and make him carry me around this island. But people here have been saying great things about the horseback riding. So, maybe that's something worth checking out. And then, yeah, you have kind of the other side of the spectrum. We went on one of the Jeep tours, which I didn't feel as bad about a combustible engine pulling my ass around the island. But that's pretty cool. So it's got this rainforest feel here. They got a local beer. If you're a beer enthusiast, one of the beers that they have here that I've actually been enjoying. Now, I enjoy it with a lime, and everybody else is kind of take it as they so choose. Most people here seem to drink it without it. I usually get a funny stare, and their limes are kind of like almost drizzly, kind of weird looking. You think they'd have robust limes here, but apparently not, because I almost have questioned if it was an orange. That's how they looked. But people gave me weird stares anyways when I ordered it with the lime. So maybe if you get this beer, the name of the beer is Pitten, and they make it here locally. It's a good beer. It's a lager, light beer. But I enjoyed it. It's if you're looking for something flair, it's kind of a local. We did the same thing when we were in Aruba, a little local flair for you. And like I said, it's one of those things that order it maybe as the locals order, and don't do what Jeff did. And it's actually funny because we watched Jaws 2 before I went swimming in the ocean, of course. And I was thinking of Jaws 1 where he's like, Pippin, Pippin, where the dog's missing. But this is actually Pitten beer. But like I said, it's been really nice. And then, it's just kind of the relaxation. I think if you find the right resort, just taking it easy and enjoying the sun. It's coming back out now. I said kind of hit that 15-minute window where, you get a big downpour, and then all of a sudden things are looking sunshine on your shoulders, as some guy was singing as he walked past the front of our hotel room here the other night. It was close. It was like almost sunset. And that's one final thing. We didn't end up doing this because there's a great spot here to watch the sunsets. But there was a couple from Philadelphia, actually, which they left yesterday. They took a catamaran out for a sunset tour, and they give out wine and stuff like that. Some of the kind of typical stuff you see at some of these islands. But I recommend that. The lighthouse that's up here, we talked about that briefly. You could do the tour of the VG Lighthouse, which I think like it probably doubles as the beacon for the George F.L. Charles Airport because it's like right above it. It's just white, so I don't think they're using it for that. As we know, beacons at airports are green and white. I think we've mentioned that before on here, but maybe for some of those people that listen to us that don't fly in aviation, but just listen to us because they like to hear me talk about how I swim my fat ass through the ocean and think about Jaws. If they're not as much in aviation, yes, beacons at airports are white and green. Well, I think I'm probably going to end it here. I have my last day in St. Lucia. Feel free to drop me a line at dapodcast85@gmail.com if there's things in St. Lucia that I didn't cover that you like. If there's things that you didn't like, feel free to drop me that too. Like I said, this is our last day here. We're going to be heading back northbound, nice and cold. I got the aisle seat though. Like I said, I want to be in command of my bathroom future. I love the window seat, but I like to understand if I have to go to the bathroom, I'm not trapped up against the window. Maybe somebody's sleeping. So looking forward to getting back home, even though it will be cold. I've been monitoring on the cameras. I can see the duck and the geese and everybody in the backyard and trying to stay warm. And as we're getting out of February into March, this is a great time to be up north. Probably get out and do some flying, maybe put some of that on YouTube. But like I said, always feel free to drop me a line at dapodcast85@gmail.com. If you have anything that you want to see in future episodes, or if you have any thoughts, comments, concerns, questions, whatever, feel free to send it over. And until next time, my friends, I'll see you down the runway.